Or your,
Back and forth.
What did you want on now?
No, I have to get my,
so which one is the first one?
I have my couple.
Right. I think when I plug them the wrong way, it misses it out, and that's why I screwed that.
Okay.
I'll hold to that.
Is there one Joe goes? Yeah, but you're about when you did I know, I a little bit, once I get to. I have to stop. Like the candy. When it was. Thank you. I'm talking. And. My yeah.
We're supposed to be looking for God. It would be good if you would like.
Well, see, see over here. It's. On that side of me, go like that. You're also going one.
You want to be a teacher. Yes. So the red states.
Yes, please, we need books.
That's what's the. Thank you, thank you. Go to, They definitely don't. I saw that first. Our nurse came from.
Thank you.
Learned to have a salary. Great day. Which, oh, but you know, I mean.
I discovered during the pandemic. Yeah. That hot water was, pretty
Hot water with money.
Water. Water. What did I do?
Water cold.
That is very.
Limited, yeah.
Good suggestion.
Let's get it in, so it's right.
Right, everything is.
I know you are.
We need to try to get on.
I turned it on, Texas, see if they're. We're ready on line. No.
Yeah.
Confusing and have a little bit of new. That's 5:30 we go into. Yeah.
You know, and then by any number.
Where not into it, doing it, doing it, sitting on at home, by myself.
Professional, all about these things.
We did it when we had.
Well, you know, then you go to. As you say. But nobody can control the running of the poor.
I see them. Yesterday I was walking, only that house over there, and we're in the top of the school. Did I made it? Good morning now, how are you?
Not in my city. Yeah, since you graduated, it's a little. Just forget it. It's cool. Everything.
Yesterday was 15, and my little wife always said, you know, I don't like this, I'm always saying, oh, no. I'm so glad that you came to.
All right, oh, jump everyone. Great to see all of you this morning. All right, so let's start with our blessing. Baruch. I'm there, it's started, but it's Gotana, it's Ivan. All right, so we are moving on in our liturgy. Now we're going to be on page 28. Page 28 in our weekday service. So having now completed the study of the Talit, next thing you see in here, of course, we're going in order, is even that right there in our Form Siddur, striking anyway. How, when you see this here, are you surprised? Are you, what are your reactions to seeing it, Howard?
I'm surprised not anymore. But certainly, I mean, as recently as when Mayor, you know, as recently as when Rabbi Mayor decided that he wanted to wear tefillin at Morning Minion, there was some controversy.
Really?
Yeah, well, first he asked us, not in a formal way, but, you know, surveyed us kind of individually, how he thought people would react. And, there's no question that, you know, I mean, when I mentioned it to some of my friends who were longtime members of Temple Beth-El, you know, there were big frowns, and there were, you know, it was along the lines of, you know, they're taking us further down that road, and, you know, I thought this was a reform.
Uh-huh.
As I say now, you know, it takes the person to lay the groundwork. You just walked in here and were wearing tefillin and then gave it a thought.
Yeah.
And, you know, and I remember the same thing happened with kippot, clergy wearing kippot on their head. I mean, Rabbi Morris Barzilai asked for permission of the ritual committee to do that.
Wow.
And it was denied.
It was tonight.
Oh, wasn't it somebody whose kid wanted to learn it? And that was part of it also, and that was before the Department of Finance.
Yeah.
That's very interesting, yeah.
I remember I was part of the Minion group, and there was a lot of controversy, and Rabbi Meir was very concerned about, you know, putting on.
So what do you think is the, if you can recall to that time, like, what is the, like, what's the source of controversy?
I think the source of controversy is that those members who were against it were part of this congregation for such a long time, and that belonged to the conservative and orthodox. I mean, the same thing as Howard said with the wearing it before, or the talit, having the talit hanging out now is just amazing, you wouldn't need that.
Right. What do you think it is about Ali and Tefillin and Kippot that are like touchstones in that way? You know, yeah, Bonnie.
I think it makes people nervous that the temple's becoming like orthodox. Those are symbols,
They're symbols of.
a higher religious, you know,
Not higher religion.
almost like, you know, a little fanatic or.
Interesting, yeah, Ina.
I think it's the fact that men were the one that were always wearing it and women were never had before. So
Yeah.
it's a big change.
So those elements are highlight kind of gender
Yeah, gender.
differences in practice. Okay, good, Mel?
Well. I went to yeshiva when I was a kid. Right. Through the ninth grade. And, well, first one, my parents weren't that observant, but a lot of children were observant. I felt really, torn about, you know, I had to do this, I have to do that, I have to wear a yarmulke, or something, I'll find out that your parents aren't religious. It was very, stressful as a kid. And here, you know, I did, in Beth-El, the emphasis on choosing for, not more relaxed, but your own journey, you're able to pick your own journey. And well, the Rabbi man giving me a signal, he wants me to wear tefillin, what's a signal here, you know? And in fact, I think he sort of implied, I don't know how he did it, he wanted other people to wear it, I don't remember anymore. I had the feeling.
Yeah, he was definitely encouraging us to do it. He gave lessons to one or two, they happened to be men who were interested in learning, you know, how to wrap it. So, yeah.
Yeah, so interesting, you know, Mel, you said something about, you know, Reform Judaism was about choosing. As opposed to, you have to, which I think is definitely the case, you know, today. I mean, that's, Reform Judaism is about choice, and that's what you see here in the prayer book, where it says, for those who wear the tefillin, just like in the previous one, for those who wear talit, it indicates that this is a choice that you might make, and you might legitimately make as a practicing Reformed Jew. Of course, nothing is obligatory, and that's the key, you know, distinction from us and, like, say, even a conservative synagogue. You know, where maybe not with tefillin, but with kippot, you know, at a conservative synagogue, standard practice would be men and boys who come into the synagogue are required to wear a kippah. So in Reform Judaism, we don't have requirements for anything of that nature. But it is a choice. And what I find so interesting, and it just like, it really kind of, to me, helps, you know, me have a greater understanding of, you know, the evolution of Reform Judaism. Is not only from, you know, maybe kind of less, you know, observance of outward things like, you know, ritual garb and so forth, to more of it, but more importantly, an evolution from no choice. I mean, think about, you know, what we're describing here, that in earlier times, what the rabbi you're talking about was denied a request to wear a kippah. That's about anything but choice.
Right.
Right? I mean, so that's saying, like, no, you may not choose to do this. That's an illegitimate Reform choice. Reform Jews don't do that. To where we are today, which is that any choice you might make, if it's informed by your own study and spirituality and so forth, is a legitimate choice. That's a major difference in terms of where we are as a movement, and it marks a journey from what we might call orthodoxy with a small o, meaning like there's one correct way and other ways are not correct. Orthodoxy with a small o to heterodoxy or pluralism. So there was a professor at Hebrew Union College who's long been deceased, but he was teaching in the middle to late part of the 20th century by the name of Alvin Reines, Reines. And he was an exponent of what he called heterodoxy. He wrote a book called Heterodoxy. And his theory of Reform Judaism was that Reform Judaism ought to be a heterodox community, meaning that there are many different ways of believing and practicing and so forth within the Reform community, and that the key principle of heterodoxy is that my freedom ends where your freedom begins, and vice versa. Okay, so that I have the right to choose and practice however I want to, so long as it doesn't infringe on your ability to do the same. That was Reines's theory. Now, in his time, I think he was less, that idea was a minority view. But I would say that his idea of heterodoxy has prevailed now in Reform Judaism. And it's evidenced by what we see in the Siddur. The Siddur is, I think I mentioned to you before, one of my colleagues in Chicago, an Orthodox rabbi, said to me that he thinks of the Siddur as the Shulchan Aruch of Jewish belief. The Shulchan Aruch is a code of Jewish law. It tells you like, this is what we do. This is, how we practice. And in his mind, the Siddur is the same thing, but for how we believe. And so so this book is really important for us to know and understand, because it says something about who we are, how we think, and so forth as Reformed Jews. And here in the pages of the book, we see for those who wear tefillin, which says to us that wearing tefillin is something that fits within the umbrella of Reform practice, if you so choose. But
I remember coming to services with Rabbi Rubin, he was a little girl. When it came time for Yisker, he used to say, people in mourning, please stand. As years went on, I was so pleased when the rabbi would say,
Right.
whoever wanted to stand. Because I always stood with my grandparents.
yeah,
And it really made a big impression on me.
yeah.
Yes, that's a big.
Yeah, choice. So I wanna take us back quickly. We have done this, looked at this before, but I think it's worth looking at again. Just the, let me share this screen, sorry. Share the screen for those of you online. We're gonna look at this, just a quick comparison of, the platform of Reform Judaism. And I want to compare 1885, the first one, with 1999, the most recent. Okay, specifically when it comes to kind of this ritual practice, ritual dress. So this is here in 1885. Principle number 4. We hold that all such Mosaic and rabbinical laws as regulate diet, priestly purity, and dress originated in ages and under the influence of ideas entirely foreign to mental and spiritual state. They fail to impress the modern Jew with a spirit of priestly holiness. Their observance in our days is apt rather to obstruct than to further modern spiritual elevation. So that's in 1885, the founding document of American Classical Reform Judaism. This is in no way leaves room for choice. This says these things are foreign to who we are. We don't do them because they fail to impress us with the spirit of holiness. That's bold. I mean, like, what if there's someone in the congregation that says they actually do impress me with the spirit of holiness? Well, this statement leaves no room for that. Right? And in fact, it goes even further to say that observing them is more likely to obstruct spiritual elevation than to further. Okay, so this is an important document for us to be aware of course, because this sets the tone for Reform Judaism in America. And even today, you know, more than 100 and, you know, almost 150 years later, we still feel, you know, that there are resonance, echoes of this, and how we feel that like Reform Jews don't do these things. Right? However, I think it is important to understand that the philosophy of this behind the statement is a philosophy of orthodoxy with a lowercase o.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Now I want to show you. Whoops. Sorry. I want to show you the statement of 1999. So this is the most recent statement of principles for Reform Judaism. Okay. Okay, so this one right here is the core one that I want to show you, and then we're going to look at an elaboration of this and an accompanying commentary on that was published by the movement. So here it says, we respond to God daily through public and private prayer, through study, and through the performance of other mitzvot, sacred obligation.
Good morning. How are you?
Hello, good morning.
Not good.
Oh, okay. Sorry, whoever's talking to is not that good this morning. All right. So we respond to God through public and private prayer, through study, and through performance of other mitzvot, sacred obligations. Bein adam lamakom, meaning obligations to God, and bein adam lachavero, meaning obligations to other human beings. Okay. Now I think we've talked about before these two broad categories of mitzvot: bein adam lamakom, bein adam lachavero. Bein adam lachavero are mitzvot that apply to our relationships and interactions with other people. So another term for them is ethical mitzvot. So, you know, honesty and commerce, weights and measures, honoring, you know, parents, returning lost property, giving tzedakah, all of those things fall under mitzvot bein adam lachavero, obligations to other human beings. Mitzvot bein adam lamakom, meaning obligations to God, are what are also termed ritual mitzvot. Okay, like keeping Shabbat, fasting on Yom Kippur, celebrating Sukkot, putting on tefillin and talit. These are all mitzvot that have nothing to do with our relationship with other people. They have only to do with our relationship with God. Now, this document here says we respond to God daily through the performance of mitzvot bein adam lamakom. This is part of what we do as Reformed Jews. That's a 180 from 1885, which rejected mitzvot bein adam lamakom. for the most part. Okay, now I want to show you in the, there's a commentary on the principles of 1999 where this is elaborated. Let's see, let me just find it on the.
But
Yes,
the first one you showed us. Didn't mention God in that paragraph.
in which one?
The first, the
In 1885, did it mention God?
was God,
Not in that paragraph.
was God mentioned
In the document, yeah, but it speaks about, it says the God idea, the God idea. That doesn't refer specifically to God. Okay, so let's look here. Okay, so this is a commentary on the 1999 principles. This is actually, we're commenting on another section of the principle that I didn't show you, but the statement of the principle is we are called to mitzvot, the means by which we make our lives holy. And we are committed to the study of the whole array of mitzvot and to the observance of those that speak to us as individuals and as a community. That's the statement from the principles. So here's the elaboration on the principles in this commentary. So the whole array of mitzvot. This paragraph reflects the most significant break from the Pittsburgh Platform. That's 1885. By committing ourselves to study the whole array of mitzvot, Reformed Jews affirm that all the mitzvot of the Torah can call to us as they call to all Jews, though we may feel, quote, addressed by different ones at different times in our lives. And by some, perhaps not at all. Okay, so the idea here is that it's our responsibility as Reformed Jews to learn about all the mitzvot, to engage with them, and then to decide for ourselves what we're going to do with them. Do we feel called to observe a particular mitzvah or do we not? Do we want to experiment and see how it feels or do we not? That's up to us, but we have a responsibility to learn about them, which is what we're doing in this class. It goes on. When asked whether he put on tefillin, Franz Rosenzweig, who's an important German Jewish philosopher, is said to have responded, "Not yet," implying that there is a difference between hearing the call of a mitzvah and being ready to respond to it in the affirmative. And then it says we're committed to perform observing those that speak to us as individuals and as a community. It said, the experience of dialogue includes not only an individual's response to a mitzvah, but a community's as well. For example, while only a few individuals in a synagogue may themselves keep kosher, they may vote for the synagogue kitchen to be kosher for a variety of reasons. That all Jews may feel comfortable eating there, to symbolize the members' awareness that the mitzvot of kashrut appear in the Torah, to test out the experience of kashrut in a communal setting, to see whether the mitzvot of dietary practice will call to them as individuals. And then the statement says, some of these mitzvot have long been observed by Reformed Jews, others demand renewed attention because of the unique context of our own times. That's in the statement of principles. So the elaboration says, we sometimes forget how many mitzvot have been followed by Reformed Jews for 200 years. Faithfulness to the Hebrew calendar, some observance of Shabbat, festivals and minor holidays, Torah study, the obligation to pray according to the ancient outline of the service, most of the mitzvot involving ethical practices between human beings, and remedying the condition of the poor and otherwise disadvantaged. Others, both ancient and modern, demand renewed attention. Where there used to be a number of Reformed synagogues which forbade their worship to cover their heads or wear talitot, as in Temple Beth-El, more and more synagogues feel addressed as a community by these mitzvot, setting out kippot and talitot for those who feel addressed as individuals to wear these garments without requiring anyone to wear them. In a time when more and more people are using diet to express their beliefs, our people's ongoing relationship with God makes an increasing number of Reformed Jews look seriously at aspects of kashrut. The third draft of the principles specifically mentioned kashrut, talit, tefillin, and mikvah, ritual immersion, to demonstrate the principle that there is no mitzvah barred to Reformed Jews. Interestingly, that was in a draft, but it didn't make it the final. Even as the Reform movement does not compel the observance of any mitzvah. Implied in the word modern is a desire to introduce innovation while preserving tradition. An example of this might be extending dietary restrictions to animals raised under conditions violating Sa'ar Ba'alei Chayim, inflicting pain on living creatures, or refraining from foods which demonstrate the oshek, oppression of those who work the fields to harvest our foods. To study the mitzvah of shatnez, that's like you can't wear wool and linen together. Calling us to examine garments for a forbidden linen and wool mixture can lead us to examine labels for firms practicing oshek through sweat up labor or payments of a sub-minimum wage. To study the mitzvah of mezuzah can call us to place mezuzot not only on our front doorposts, but on the entrance to every room in our houses, dedicating each room to a holy purpose. Thus, the living room mezuzah might contain texts on achnas anorchim, welcoming travelers. The dining room texts on eating and blessing. The den texts on learning. The bedroom texts on love. In these ways, modern Reformed Jews can further integrate mitzvot bein adam lamakom, the ones between us and God, and bein adam l'chaviro, blending spiritual concerns with increased learning and acts of social justice. Okay, so that's just kind of an elaboration of where the movement was in 1999. So what are your reactions to this? I see Shelley, your hand's up, so go ahead.
I want to go back to the original platform for a second, because clearly 1999, we're talking about how learning is a big component, studying, and then maybe experiencing it, trying on tefillin, trying on talit, seeing if it speaks to you spiritually, if you want to do it. But back in the original one, clearly they were like, it's incredibly radical, right? That they said, just toss it all out. And I'd like to know, I've heard this story over the years, if you know if it's true, that at that original platform meeting, it was at lunch, and shrimp was served or something where they were meeting. And
that was at the banquet celebrating the first ordination class of Hebrew College.
Okay, so is it true? But is it true that the people that were so horrified that many of them left and started the conservative thing?
Yeah,
that's a true story. Okay,
it wasn't only because of that lunch. That's kind of the myth that that it was that one meal that like then caused them to leave and start the conservative movement. It wasn't only because of that, but that was part of it. That at the ordination banquet for the first rabbinic class ordained at Hebrew College, they served a whole array of treif, non-kosher food. And it became known as the treifa banquet. And yeah, and then people who were discontented with the direction that this new movement was going, who had up to that point been part of it, said like, this is going too far, and they broke off and kind of started conservative meetings.
So,
Yeah, so Bonnie, go ahead.
No, I didn't have my hand raised.
Oh, you didn't have your hand raised. Okay, I'm sorry, Shelley, were you done or was there more that you wanted to say?
I just wanted to say, so that must have been really pretty early on, and perhaps that's where people all the time, they still say, oh yeah, Reformed Jews, you don't have to do anything you don't want to do. You just, you don't have to do anything. And it offends me when they say that. It's not true. And so it's kind of interesting how over the years, the reform movement has tried to be so much more careful of, what this actually means. So there's my comment.
Yeah, important in terms of language. I want us to understand that it is true that as Reformed Jews, our religious philosophy says you don't have to do anything. Okay, because there's no external compulsion for anything. It's up to you as an individual. Individual autonomy is the core principle of our philosophical principle of Reformed Judaism. Now, what it used to be, because remember, if that were the case in 1885, then that would mean somebody could exercise their autonomy to wear a tallit. But no, in classical Reformed Judaism, you are forbidden from making that choice. But today, individual autonomy is the only source of authority. So as a Reformed Jew, you're not obligated externally to do anything, but you are permitted to do what you choose. Okay, Lee.
I think in 1885, in order to pull back, they felt they needed to make a radical change. And as time went on, it was, it's okay to learn about these things, because without knowing what something is, without knowing the meaning of it, without knowing why we do it, then we can't choose either way.
Right, that's right. So yeah, part of that shift, I think I think there are a number of factors that contribute to that shift. One thing to be, is that in 1885, the rabbis who wrote that document, they had all grown up, as very traditionally observant Jews. I mean, they knew about everything. They were raised in yeshivas and why? Because this was all new, right? So they knew what they were rejecting, right? And their decision to reject was based on, personal thoughts and feelings and, ideology and whatever about, the current moment. So they were making learned choices. The problem then, what happens is as you go down the generations, because of the choices that they made, the next generations became not learned in those things because they weren't exposed to it. So then we weren't making informed choices, right? We were just told that this is what a Reformed Jew does, and this is what a Reformed Jew doesn't do. And the things that gave that, the founders such kind of, that were so ideologically grounded based on a full knowledge and experience of a traditional life, which for them was a conscious choice, for later generations became not a conscious choice. So I think I think a recognition over time of that contributed to it. People say like, oh, I would really actually like to know about that and maybe see if that's something for me. Also, that America changed between 1885 and 1999.
Yes.
And whereas in the late 19th century, American Reformed Jews, were seeking to assimilate and gain acceptance, and they felt that the most potent way to do that would be to not appear different. They distanced themselves from things like the outward ritual garb that would make them look different. But in 1999, the concern of assimilation, making sure that we find a place and fit in, was not the concern anymore.
It didn't matter.
It didn't matter. I mean, American Jews are much more comfortable in America. And so it opens the door to say, like, hey, we're secure now, and like, maybe we should look back at some of this stuff, and like, maybe, that was too far, so the world changed. Yeah, Howard.
A couple of things. One, for those who remember soon to be Rabbi Megan Brumer, if you go to her website, Google it, you will hear her deliver a sermon on the subject of being knowledgeable so that you can make proper choices.
Nice.
She chose that topic for one of the required sermons that she had. On this notion of adapting meets vote to fit modern day concerns and principles, like what do we eat and what do we wear? I think that's such an important development. I mean, as we look for ways to bring people into Judaism, into our synagogues, closer to God, a way to link their beliefs to Jewish practice, to make them realize, hey, there's a Jewish way of thinking about this and a Jewish way of doing this is so important. And then the next step becomes creating rituals, maybe for things that weren't even thought of, like, what can we do when a pet dies? What can we do? What ceremony should we engage in when somebody retires after many years of service to a certain organization? What do we do when we send our kids off to college? Are there Jewish ways, or their blessings, or their ways of doing these things? So
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think part of the effect of, kind of stripping out some of, the ritual and so forth from classical Reform Judaism is that generations of Reformed Jews just weren't aware at all of kind of the, what's in the treasure chest, in terms of Jewish vocabulary and Jewish ways of doing things. So that when we arrive at a time, as the commentary document points out, look, lots of people in this day and age are engaging in eating practices for a variety of reasons, health reasons, for philosophical reasons, and I think a lot of people are looking out into the secular world, or sometimes into Buddhism or whatever, to find these things, because they don't even really know that Judaism has thought about this already, right? And that we have ways, we have ways that can be a baseline and can be adapted and modified, that in other words, you don't have to always look out to outside of your own tradition to find meaningful ritual. People are looking for ritual practices, and people have all kinds of ritual practices in their lives for everything. Lest we think like, Judaism, we know ritualizes every aspect of life, but even if you don't live within a halakhic framework of ritual, if you really break down your life, you do ritualize lots of stuff about your life. You just do it in ways that aren't explicitly Jewish. But Judaism does teach us how to ritualize things. So we lost a connection and an awareness of the gold mine that is our tradition, because we excised all of it. Right, so now people are looking back to it. That's why in Reformed Judaism, we're like, let's try some of this stuff because it could actually be meaningful. Yeah.
Oh, okay, I'm gonna just take what you said, and reinforce it. For 35 years, I had a private practice in Jersey, working with ultra-Orthodox children from North Jersey Yeshiva, Mariah, etc. And what I came to understand is I wanted to belong to Reform Temple because of what we talked about, choice. But it gave me an immense understanding of what how they practice, what they believe, and a wonderful acceptance to their practices. And it enriched my life, even though I would not choose to be in an Orthodox temple, but I understand how they feel, what their practices are. And as I'm repeating myself, it enriched my life. The tightness of the community was so intense that one little vignette, and then I'll stop, is that my son was in the hospital for a while. And I canceled a couple students. And I came home from the hospital, and outside of my door were boxes and boxes of meals labeled, freeze this, use this. And this is the intensity of their order, was very moving to me.
Okay, thank you. So I wonder, I want to read the liturgy that we're going to study, but one last thing before we do that. Think about, so, back to kind of the, what we saw in the 1885 platform and what you guys are describing about, Temple Beth-El, about controversies surrounding code and Talid and, the rabbi wearing its tefillin. See if you can examine for a minute. What is the source of, or what were the anxieties that, that were kind of underlying opposition to people, wearing those items? What were the anxieties underlying opposition? After all, it would seem like if the assistant rabbi says, I would like to wear a kippah, I would assume he wasn't saying like he was demanding that every congregant wear a kippah. It was only that he wanted to wear. So what was underlying the opposition to him doing that, knowing that nobody else would have to? Stuart?
I think that there's the concern that if the rabbi is doing something and it's new and it's different, that creates a little anxiety. But also the feeling is, well, are they going to expect me to do those things as well? In other words, will I give up my flexibility, and will the temple have a mandate that we wear kippahs? Usually kippahs are a low-level addition to one's practice because it's not much of an effect. It's a little more so, and then development is probably the next level. But I think the concern is, well, how is this going to affect me?
So is it, so if the request of the assistant rabbi is, I want to wear one, and I'm not asking anybody else, are you saying like there was fear of like a slippery slope that like eventually like that the rabbi was being disingenuous or something, like he really wants me to make me do this, but he's just not saying it? But like, so there's concern about impingement on individual freedom.
Correct.
Okay, a concern about impingement on individual freedom.
I don't think it would be so much fear as if the congregant really looked up to the assistant rabbi and they would say, oh, gee, if he's doing it, maybe I should be doing it.
And so what would be the underlying kind of anxiety?
I don't know if I wanted to,
I don't know if I want to, but I might feel compelled,
right?
okay?
Because I respect I respect the guy, I look up to,
Okay, so it might
influence.
influence me, okay? Howard and Anita.
First of all, my recollection could be wrong, but I don't think it is. I think it was written in the temple bylaws that the rabbis were to not wear kippot on the bima. And it was a matter of overcoming that. And just the postscript to that is that within a year or two later, we hired Rabbi Karen Bender and Rabbi Rennie Altman. And in the very first Friday night service that they appeared, they walked onto the bima wearing kippot,
Yeah.
and that was the end.
And that was that, okay.
But I think it went to the 10th in the community. I mean, there were four major synagogues in the temple in Great Neck in those days. Emmanuel, us as the Reform, and Temple Israel and Great Neck Synagogue. And there was real animosity, Great Neck Synagogue. They wouldn't set foot in here. Rabbi Davidson and Rabbi Wolf were not on good terms
Right.
at all. And so I think it was just this notion of, we're not going to be like them. That's how they do things. This is how we do things. God forbid we should somehow slip into doing something the way they do it. We're different. We're reformed. We're going to always be reformed. This is who we are.
Yeah,
And what do we think we're doing?
Yeah.
Regarding this or putting that on us?
yeah, okay, interesting. Thank you,
I
Nina.
know the education.
I'm thinking about this from the point of view of the general congregation. Not the leadership that knows the bylaws, and I think that one of the trepidations might be that I may, before the rabbi asked to wear the kippah, feel that I am a religious Reformed Jew, that I am following all the obligations that I need to feel good about how I define myself as a Reformed Jew. And now something new is being introduced by somebody who I respect. I'm not even sure if this is going to be again one of those things that only men can do and women can't. But just the idea that maybe it makes me question my religiosity or my own orthodoxy, the small o, because now something's being introduced that's foreign to me, and it may make me feel less religious than I felt the day before.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah.
So sometimes, there are times where I feel jealous of those who call themselves Jews, who know exactly what they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
Whereas with me, I have to question everything I do. That's tiring.
Yeah,
And so sometimes it's kind of nice to just be told, you do this at this time, you do that at that
Yeah.
time. And then you're doing the right thing and you can call yourself a good Reformed Jew. But when you keep being offered new alternatives, and then you have to learn about them before you decide if you want to do them,
right,
that can be difficult.
yeah.
And I think that's one of the problems, too many choices.
Too many choice? Yeah.
Well, then I guess I'm just not a really, I can't tell you how many times people would say to me, when I was president, I'm not really religious.
Yeah,
And this concept of the definition of religious and, in their mind, what had to do with ritual.
that they didn't follow ritual. But, and I would say to them, I would say, but look at all the wonderful mitzvot that you do. And these tend to be people who would be donors, large donors
Yeah.
to the town.
Yeah,
And I would say, you know, that is the beginning of your being a religious Jew.
yeah,
You know, and hopefully they went away with something to think about. But that's, you know, that, I think that's part of the problem. Is
Yeah.
that the more opportunity we're given, the harder it is to then find a definition of what you truly are.
yes, okay, so Nina and Howard's comments, point to the concept of identity. This issue of ritual garb, kippah, talit, and tefillin. In Reform Judaism, have in the past, maybe a little less so today, but have in the past functioned as what my teacher, Rabbi David Ellenson, calls boundary issues. Okay, a boundary issue is something that it's you may also call it like a red line or something. It's like if you cross that, that thing kind of defines the demarcation between one community and another. Okay, so that like if you wear a kippah and a talit and tefillin, you are not reformed. Right? That's a red line, it's a boundary issue. And what Ellenson points out in his scholarship is that boundary issues emerge not because there's anything kind of intrinsic about those things per se. It's because it's part of it's always driven by context and the social landscape around it. So when Howard is describing like there's a tense relationship between Temple Beth-El and Great Neck Synagogue. Okay, there's a tense relationship there and so forth that these things become the boundary issues that tell us who's in this and who's in that one. And Ellenson's scholarship shows that in different contexts and times in Judaism, different boundary issues emerge. So in the Orthodox, a major boundary issue for them in the 19th century German setting where Reformed Judaism was born. Like for us, we might say in contemporary America it was talit and kippah. In 19th century Germany, the big boundary issue for Orthodox Jews, see if anyone can guess. What guess? What do you think might have emerged in 19th century Germany as kind of like a boundary, a red line that this indicates you are not Orthodox? Any guess? The answer is if the synagogue had an organ.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so because in 19th century Germany, the Reformed Jews were trying to assimilate and so they had organs in their synagogues because there were organs in churches. So the Orthodox community, the way they kind of define like this is not legitimate, this is the red line, is an organ. And then these Orthodox rabbis started writing responsa and these rulings and so forth that said it is forbidden for an Orthodox Jew to enter into a synagogue that has an organ. You'd be excommunicated if you go into a place that has an organ. Not because there are a lot of issues with the organ, but it's like pretty minor. It's not that big of a deal. but it becomes a huge deal because of the context. Another one, in that time, 19th century Germany, not quite as like fiery as the organ, but another boundary issue is the placement of the bema. Okay, so in traditional Orthodox synagogues, in that setting, they had the bema in the center of the room. Reformed congregations started putting the bema in the front, because again, that's where the church is at. So the Orthodox rabbis went berserk over this and said, like, you know, it's forbidden to have the bema anywhere except for the center of the room. Again, not because it's like, that's the most important mitzvah in the Torah or whatever, but because of the social context. Whereas in, Allison points out in this article that you're passing, in Hungary at the time, where where Reformed Judaism wasn't a thing the way it was in Germany, they didn't care. They had bemas. Some kind of synagogues had bemas in the front, some of them had in the middle, and it wasn't a deal. But it was a huge deal in Germany because of the setting. And I think like here in America, the kippah and the talit become a huge deal, not because substantively it really matters. It's not like it's because of the setting. And we decided culturally, probably because of our interactions, you know, like in broadly speaking around America between Reformed communities and Orthodox communities and the tensions that existed, that like, if you wear a kippah, that makes you like them, and we don't like them, and we don't want to be like them. We are us. We latched onto those things. But when you look at it that way, you realize that when those dynamics change, there's nothing like intrinsic about a kippah, wearing a kippah on your head, that makes you one thing or another or whatever. It's just a thing. It has its valence because of the sociology.
And it's symbolic.
Right? Okay. So we're in a different time. So all of this can say, like, we have permission now to let go of those anxieties because it's just a different world. And wearing a kippah doesn't make you, you know, Orthodox. Wearing a tefillin doesn't make you Orthodox. Okay? We don't have to hold on to boundary issues that existed in the past because they spoke to a different sociological lens. Okay, so Mark, then I see Shelley and Karen and Nell. Go ahead, Mark.
So just a quick comment. What you're saying now suddenly piques my interest. Clearly in the late 1800s, the people and the rabbis who came up with reform, it seems like they went out of the way to be very different than Orthodox.
Yeah.
Okay, because, okay, there's a strict rule that we're going to keep it here. Oh, well, we have a strict rule on our side. So they clearly wanted to differentiate themselves from Orthodox. But now what you're saying is more clear. Suddenly, the beam that goes in the front, the organ, and then you got the organ. So now suddenly, not only do we want to be different than the Orthodox, but we want to be more like another institution completely. Church, I mean, why in the world would they do that?
No, because they wanted to blend in. Okay, because assimilation was a goal. And you know, those early Reformed Jews said, like, you know, we want to build good relationships with our Christian neighbors, and we want them to think highly of us and not think that we're weird. And we want to be able to invite them into our house and for them to feel like, you know, they're welcome there and it's a normal place. And there's not like weird, goofy things happening here and people are dressed like crazy. That's why they did it. Okay, so they achieved our goals, but guess what? I mean, like nowadays, if you're a Christian neighbor who invited them to come into the synagogue and they saw somebody wearing a talit, they wouldn't say like, "Ooh, maybe these Jews don't have a place in America." They wouldn't do that. The world is different. But that was the concerns then. Okay, but we don't need to be held captive by the concerns of those times. Also, when you think about like what becomes a boundary issue, it's also kind of funny and then like we say, wearing a kippah is like, no, that's a big no. But let's say like, I mean, if the rabbi wanted to observe Shabbat, you know, like not drive on Shabbat. I wonder if the congregation would have required him to drive on Shabbat. Right? No, you have to. You're not allowed to walk on Shabbat. Right? Or if the rabbi would like prefer not, you know, want to observe kashrut or aspects of kashrut and like doesn't eat pork, would they force the rabbi to eat pork? You know, or say like you can't do you can't abstain from mixing meat and dairy? No, because that, I mean, now kashrut is still a boundary issue in a lot of ways. So that's a little bit of a harder example, but I guess the point I'm trying to make is that we latch on to certain things because of their symbolic value. You know, when maybe there are even other things that are more substantively relevant, but we just latch on to boundary issues. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I remember when I was treasurer of the temple and our audit firm was it was run by Orthodox Jews. And they came to do the audit, and I had never met them before. So there's this young man, and my faith was we were introduced, and I put out my hand to shake his hand,
Yeah.
and he said, "I can't shake your hand, and you know, I can't touch you. You're a woman." And my first reaction was to apologize, like I had done something. And when I look back on it, it's like coming this far, which is probably over a decade later, it's like, really the problem was yours, not mine.
Yeah,
You know, but it creates that
yeah,
boundary. And I guess the other thing, you know, when you were saying, well, what are the things that would make us different? It was like what men and women praying together.
yeah,
I mean, that was another big difference.
definitely.
You know, which would make it very difficult for Orthodox Jews to come into our synagogue.
Mhm.
And God forbid we should have a woman on the bima.
Right,
You know, so there are, but somehow I feel like Reform Jews have a need to apologize as if we're doing something that is not right.
right, because right, I agree with you, and I think like there's something in like just generally speaking, I think in the Reform conscious where we understand ourselves and define ourselves in relation to orthodoxy. And as long as we do that, you know, like we have to free ourselves. Okay, like that's the thing. And the boundary issues, by the way, are an expression of that. Right? It's like, because if I'm defining myself as against the other, that I don't do that, it's only because that's what they do. But if we liberate ourselves from defining ourselves as against the other, we would be saying like, we make whatever choices we want. We don't care what the other people. You know, so that's something I think that's deeply embedded in where we feel, even like what you said, Nina, about you know, if the assistant rabbi is wearing a kippah, you might feel less, you know, authentic or less religious, because there's this mindset that like the more that if someone wears a kippah or someone puts on a tallit, or like they're more authentically religious, but that's not true. In our community anyway, it might be true in their community, but we shouldn't be defined by their statements. We need to be defined by our own. So that's the major project, I think, is to liberate ourselves from that kind of psychological impediment so that we can create our own religiosity. You know, I believe a heterodox one that allows for make whatever choices you like, whatever's meaningful to you, that's great. That's Reformed Judaism.
But we need to accept.
So, hold on, wait, I want to have to, Shelley, and Karen, wait, I want to have to, Shelley and Karen, and we have to stop. Shelley, go ahead.
Okay, I did want to say that I think that a part of the challenge here, the reform did strike its own way in terms, for instance, social action. Social action was huge. There were years where our late wonderful rabbi, Mark Shapiro, I don't think he talked much about God, but he talked a lot about social justice. And I think I've mentioned that the whole time he was our senior rabbi, he did not wear a kippah and he did not wear a talit because he did not want congregants, particularly congregants who were involved in social justice and all this wonderful action, to feel that they were less, not as good of a Jew because they didn't wear ritual garb. The minute he retired, he started wearing ritual garb. Okay, the second thing is we're known, I think the reform movement is known for welcoming intermarried people. And to the point now where with, studying it like you did when you were at BJBE with the clergy and looking at it and saying, yes, we will marry Jew and non-Jew under certain conditions. And so ritual garb might be the beginning, but then I know that a huge flashpoint was how much Hebrew there was in the service. Intermarried people that came in as converts or whatever, they might not know. And many women who were not religiously educated at one time, they might not know Hebrew. And then there was a whole thing about transliteration. I don't think you find that anywhere. These are reform, I think these are reform considerations. How do you bring all of this back and merge it all, to find meaning?
Yeah, very nice. I agree. Thank you. Karen, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. I think, we've really gotten into some profound issues, and I love being a Reformed Jew. The very fact that we're, as women, able to engage in this spiritual wrestling with these enormous questions of meaning in our lives. For me, Yisrael, wrestling, without this ability to question, to search, redevelop, redefine. For me, it is choice above command. It's education versus indoctrination, and I want to celebrate. That's what TBE and Reform Judaism has given to me. I think, I'd like to, for me, orthodoxy has always meant oppressive patriarchy. I would not have been allowed, even my beloved modern Orthodox friend wouldn't come in for my bat mitzvah until the female rabbi and cantor had stopped singing. He only came in because I asked him for an aliyah. He was instrumental in, making it. So I celebrate that we are Reform Jews.
Beautiful.
And I thank you all. I do think the more existential threat we feel from the outside society, the more we build fences and need to feel chosen or separate or special. So I think that's when the identity issues and the boundaries get exaggerated. When we feel more comfortable or safe, we assimilate more.
Yeah, good. Thank you. All right, good discussion today. So next week, we'll read the liturgy on the tefillin and we'll dive into the substance of it. But this was a good philosophical framework. All right, thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Brad.
Have a good day.